Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're really digging into something critical. It's about the rapid collapse of Haiti's political transition timeline. We got sources here mainly from around October 22nd, 2025, and they basically reset the whole political path forward for Haiti. The bottom line, it comes straight from Jacques de Rosier, who heads Haiti's Provisional Electoral Council. He says elections are now, quote, impossible before February 2026. And that's a huge shift. I mean, they were aiming for a vote around November 15th this year.
So, okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, and that's not just a scheduling issue. It's really a statement about the state itself, driven by, well, geography and security problems. The UN Security Council is pushing for speed, on security and elections. They're right to urge that. But the reality on the ground is it's pretty tragic. The security crisis has just exploded, really, to the point where democratic access, it's physically impossible for maybe half the population. So what we need to understand in this deep dive is the sheer scale of that impossibility. How did the gangs get this much control so fast? And what does this forced political reset mean for the Constitution, for the people there?
We definitely need some context here. This isn't about missing just one deadline. Haiti hasn't had successful elections since, 2016?
That's right, 2016.
And then the president was assassinated in 2021. That power vacuum, it seems like it's been filled almost entirely by these armed groups.
Absolutely. They haven't just filled a political gap. They've taken control of territory, real physical control. And when the Electoral Council says impossible, they mean it literally. They're looking at hard data, geographic metrics. It's not just about political feeling.
Rosier was pretty clear on that.
Very clear. He essentially confirmed the state just can't provide the basic conditions needed for a vote across the country.
I remember reading they did some kind of internal audit back in June, looking at potential voting centers.
Yeah.
What did that show, even back then?
Well, that June evaluation was kind of the first big red flag. Even 4 months ago, hundreds of places, communes, voting centers, they were already off limits, inaccessible because of the gangs.
Okay.
But the sources highlight something even more alarming. The situation hasn't just stayed bad, it's gotten significantly worse since June.
How so?
The gangs didn't just consolidate in Port-au-Prince. They've actively pushed outwards, been cutting off new areas, places that were accessible before, from electoral registries, from any kind of government reach.
Oh, it's spreading.
Exactly. It's gone from being, a major urban crisis to a full-blown national security emergency.
Is there a specific example somewhere that really shows how this is spread beyond the capital?
Yes. The sources mention La Chapelle and Liancourt. These towns are in the lower Artibonite region.
The Artibonite? Isn't that Haiti's main agricultural area, the food basket?
Precisely. It's the agricultural heartland. So when gangs cut off access there, they're not just blocking votes. They're hitting the country's economic base. Its food supply lines.
Wow.
It turns the election problem into something, well, existential. It proves state authority has just crumbled across huge, vital parts of the country.
And if they can't even get into the Artibonite, how can any future vote be seen as legitimate?
That's the core issue. The UN was tracking this.
Right.
Based on that June data, the UN figured maybe 6 million people, about half the population, might still be able to reach a working voting center.
Okay, half. Still not great.
But here's the kicker. The council president, des Rosiers, he basically said, even that 6 million figure is out of date now. It's likely much lower. And they can't even give a current estimate.
They can't even count how many people could potentially vote.
And when the body in charge of elections loses the ability to do that basic count, well, the state has fundamentally lost control over its own democracy machine.
This security breakdown, it just completely changes the game for their political deadlines.
Yeah.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's talk about that date, February 7th, 2026.
Oh, February 7th. Yes, that date is looming large. It's a potential crisis point. Historically, constitutionally, it's a very significant date in Haiti.
It's the traditional handover day for presidential power, isn't it?
Exactly. It's the constitutional deadline.
And trying to ignore it or push past it has caused major problems before, right? Protests and instability.
Big problems. Mass protests, yes. So in this specific context, Feb 7th, 2026 marks the end of the planned term for the current transitional council.
The 9-member council that just took power in April 2024.
That's the one. Their mandate was envisioned to end then. So if that date comes and goes, and there's no newly elected legitimate government ready to take over, which now looks almost certain,
then you have a massive political vacuum.
A vast one. It would have been the handover day if the election planned 5 years prior had actually happened. The UN Secretary General warned Haiti cannot afford a political vacuum. That wasn't just rhetoric. It's a forecast of a constitutional crisis piled right on top of this security disaster.
And beneath all this political maneuvering, there's the humanitarian crisis. That political vacuum is being filled by just immense suffering on the ground. The cost of the gang war really hits home here.
We have to connect the political failure to the human cost. It's direct. We're talking about, what, half the population? Around 6 million people facing severe food insecurity?
6 million.
And the displacement numbers are just staggering. Over 1.3 million people forced from their homes by the violence, internally displaced.
That's only 3 million. That's like entire cities worth of people just uprooted.
Yeah.
Living where?
Living in extremely crowded displacement camps. The sources mention one, the Darius Denise school shelter. Think about trying to hold an election when over 1 million people are effectively refugees in their own country.
Hiding from the very violence that's making the vote impossible in the first place.
Precisely. And remember, the Artibonite connection. Gang control there threatens food production and aid delivery. It makes everything worse for those 1.3 million displaced people.
So the state is barely functioning, waiting for this international security force.
Which is now in a race against time, a race against a constitutional deadline that, honestly, looks almost guaranteed to be missed.
Okay, so given this complete timeline collapse, what's happening politically within Haiti, the different factions must be scrambling. How are they positioning themselves for what happens after February 7th?
Well, the discussion has fractured, as you'd expect. It's becoming quite polarized. On one side, you have groups saying, look, we need stability above all else. Let's extend or modify the mandate of the current interim council.
Their argument being it's too risky to change leaders now.
Basically, yeah, don't rock the boat when it's already sinking, essentially. They argue they need more time to get security under control first.
Makes sense. What about the other side?
The opposition groups are pushing for a stricter adherence to constitutional norms for transitions. They argue the council failed its main job, creating conditions for elections, so it should step aside.
And who would take over then?
They often suggest the most senior Supreme Court judge should take the helm. It's based on constitutional procedures for when there's a presidential vacancy.
But is that even practical?
Well, that's the thing. It's almost an academic debate at this point, because the real obstacle isn't the legal framework. It's the physical reality on the ground. Who actually controls the territory?
Which brings us right back to the gangs. Specifically, the Viv Anselm Alliance. They seem to be the elephant in the room, or maybe the controlling force of the room.
They absolutely are. This alliance, Viv Anselm, controls most of Port-au-Prince, and we have to grapple with this deep paradox they represent.
What's the paradox exactly?
On the one hand, they are actively seeking political legitimacy. They've declared themselves a political party called for dialogue. But on the other hand, major powers, like the U.S., have designated them a terrorist organization. They're accused of horrific levels of violence, thousands of killings, kidnappings, torture, systematic gang rape, arson.
So how do we square that circle?
Yeah.
A group doing that, but also asking for political talks.
You have to look at their function. In the areas they control, the state is just gone, completely absent. The gangs fill that vacuum. They essentially operate as a kind of provisional government.
A provisional government.
How? They regulate local commerce, people's movement, and critically, they are often the ones providing basic services, sometimes even distributing food.
So for people living there.
For millions of people living in desperate conditions, the only authority they might interact with daily, the only source of order or even basic supplies, might be the gang.
That makes them more than just criminals.
Much more. It makes the Viv Anselm Alliance a deeply embedded political and social reality. You can't just wish them away or, frankly, bomb them out of existence easily. Their control is the physical reason the election was declared impossible.
Okay, let's try to pull these threads together. Thinking about that international security force that's supposed to be coming. What's the immediate challenge? So what does this all mean? It means the security situation, the gang control, especially it's spread into vital areas like the Artibonite, it's forced a complete political reset. Elections are off the table until 2026 at the earliest, and that dramatically raises the stakes for any international force arriving now. They're not just stabilizing, they're racing against that February 7th constitutional cliff edge.
Right. The failure isn't just political, it's a fundamental breakdown of the state's ability to function, its sovereignty. The core problem is still, how do you build democratic legitimacy when the state literally cannot secure access to polling stations for maybe half its citizens? These non-state actors, the gangs, they've effectively taken over essential governing functions. So any new government, whether it's transitional or eventually elected, starts with a massive credibility gap and, frankly, little control over its own territory.
And the sources make it clear. Viv Antam, this alliance labeled a terrorist group, responsible for so much violence, is now demanding a voice, declaring itself a party, seeking dialogue. They control movement, goods, food, some semblance of order in large parts of the capital.
Yeah.
So the question for you, the listener, to think about is this. We have a collapsed state, and the only entity providing some basic functions of control on the ground is also a violent non-state actor.
Fair.
How does anyone, the international community, the Haitian state itself, decide how, or even if, to engage?
Yeah, if the group that can provide basic survival needs, however brutally, demands a seat at the table, the problem shifts. It's not just about fighting crime anymore. It becomes about potentially negotiating with a shadow government. And that raises a really provocative question, one we see in other state failures too. What are the possible terms of peace when the actors you might have to negotiate with are the same ones you've officially branded as terrorists?
That is the incredibly complex, difficult reality Haiti is navigating right now. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.